The Woman in the White Dress. Written by Lily Draws. This happened just yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm not quite sure what to think of it because it was just so bizarre and unbelievable. I might have just been sleep deprived. So last night at maybe 2300 hours, I was walking around my block. My town is relatively safe, so I didn't feel in danger. Plus, it was a pretty night. I had been walking for around 5 minutes when a pale woman with blonde hair and a white dress caught my eye from across the street. She was about my height and looked to be around my age, too. I didn't actually pay attention to her after I had first noticed her. While I circled the block again, she was on the same street, a couple feet in front of me. She was standing on the curb, staring at the cars passing by. It was a main road, so even that late people were still driving on it. I said hello to her, and she turned her gaze to me. I couldn't see her face super well, but from what I think I saw, she had no pupils or color in her eyes. She just stared at me. After a while, I asked if she was okay. She didn't respond again and simply pointed at the road. I was really confused and didn't understand. Right as a red car started coming down the road, she stepped into the road. The car slammed into her. It was a bloody mess. The driver immediately stopped and jumped out. He was a man in his mid-20s. We both spoke about it, freaking out. He called the police and I went around the car to see the state of the girl. Once I circled around the car, she was gone. Not gone as in dead. Gone as in she just wasn't there. The blood on the road was gone too, but not gone from his car. After the police arrived, they concluded that it was some big hoax of a kid who didn't know what they were talking about and some guy who went along with it. The blood on the truck was brought to investigation, only to be found as paint. Nothing else was put up about it. I'm still not sure if what happened was real. It felt so real, but I don't believe in the paranormal. I don't know what it was. If it was just a dream or if it was real. I remember it like it was real. I feel like I can't leave the house now. I don't understand anything now, and I kind of feel like I'm going crazy. Has anyone else experienced something like this? My Terrifying Encounter in a Soviet Red Army War Tunnel. Written by HXCTOM. I'm a tall, yet extremely skinny guy, and I'm 21 years old. I was 20 years old at the time, and it was the week before the presidential election in the United States. I felt a lot of anxiety about the election, as I live in Manhattan, and there are a lot of crazy people in that city who act as if the entire world is going to end over one simple election. So, feeling exhausted from both that and my university, I decided to visit my friends in Moscow. I'm half Russian and have an apartment in the city center of Moscow. I had never been in Russia while it snowed, and luckily during this time it was snowing. The city looked beautiful, and the vibe I had from the city was perfect. I felt so calm, safe, and the whole world around me just seemed so quiet. Unfortunately, I had severe jet lag and fell asleep around 5 p.m. Moscow time that day. My friend went home to get ready for her classes the next day, and I woke up around 3 a.m. I could not fall back asleep, so I decided to go outside and take a walk around my area while it calmly snowed. I walked around the dead, empty city in my district, and took in all of the beautiful architecture and snow falling down heavily. I don't remember for how long I was walking, but I crossed a bridge and entered deeply into a neighborhood I was not familiar with. I thought it would be okay as I was in my district, and sort of remembered the way back home. I eventually came up with this ginormous entrance of a block unit, with a beautiful gate on it. The gate was opened, so I decided to step inside. It looked like a small little compound or something similar to it. If anyone is from Russia, they'd probably know what I'm talking about. Everything was dead quiet, and the trees canopied in the square complex. To the right was an extremely tall building with a ginormous door. I peeked inside and saw a lightly dimmed lobby, typical Russian lobby vibe, with a blinking fluorescent light. I held on the door, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. I entered into the massive building and looked around. I saw many stairs wrapping around in a square leading up, a small typical Russian elevator, and to the right of the stairwell stairs that led down. The door at the bottom of the stairs was open. I absolutely do not know what came over me, as I am not one to adventure alone, but as I stated earlier, everything felt so beautiful. The quiet vibe of snow-covered Russia had me feeling so peaceful, and I decided to just tiptoe on down to the basement to take a closer look. I walked into the room with the door open and threw on my flashlight on my phone. I saw an extremely long tunnel, and I could not see the end of it. I felt threatened by it and got extremely uncomfortable. I decided it was best for me to leave. When I turned around, the only light that was entering the tunnel was from outside the doorway. I saw standing in the door a black silhouette. I quickly understood it was the outline of a person who was at least 5 inches taller than me. So I would say he was about 6 feet 5 inches. He was massive, and my stomach dropped so hard with my heart beginning to beat super quickly. He started to speak to me in Russian, but as my Russian isn't fluent, I did not understand everything he said. "I'm sorry, I don't speak Russian," I said in Russian. "You speak English?" he said in English to me. I told him I did, and he asked me if I knew where I was. "No," I told him, as my mind started to fill up with a lot of different scenarios, one of which with me having to run down this tunnel and getting lost to avoid him if he chased me. "These tunnels used to be used for Red Army soldiers to move from one place to another during the war," he explained to me. "This whole building used to be a bunker for Red Army soldiers." I said, to show some interest, and began to move towards the left while facing him, in attempts to get him to move out of the doorway. "This whole place is now apartments. I have one on top floor. You should come see it," he said to me. "It's quite late. I think I should be going," I said. However, he grabbed my small wrist with a lot of strength and led me towards the stairs to go to the main floor of the lobby. "I have a view you'll love," he called the small elevator, and if any of you have ever been to Russia, you'll know exactly what type of elevator it is, the type that can barely fit 2 people. He began telling me about how he just got back from Chicago and that his husband loved Chicago as well. This started to have me panicking as I thought to myself that there would be another man up to where he was bringing me, and I would have 2 men overpower me. Once we go to his room, I looked at this massive studio apartment he had. He had only candles to light the room, with a lot of tapestries dividing it up, with both the candle and moonlight shining through it to create a super eerie vibe. I looked out his window as he instructed me, and I have to admit, the view was amazing. I got a panoramic view of Teginskaya and the Kotolnichinskaya embankment building. Then I started scoping around looking for an opportunity to get out of there. "Where is your husband?" I asked. He looked at me and laughed. "Oh, he's dead." He then picked me up, and I asked him what he was doing. He brought me into another room, and he began to touch me inappropriately. He ran his hand down my back and took my phone from my back pocket. I didn't realize he did this, and I was just in horror as this man licked me and said explicit things in Russian. I tried to pull away, but it made him squeeze and corner me even harder. After about 10 minutes of this, he told me to wait a moment. He went into his bathroom, and in this moment, I immediately sprinted over to the door. There were no lights, so I went to pull out my phone for the flashlight. Only to my horror, the phone was missing from my back pocket. I almost nearly had a heart attack as I realized I would have to go back into that bedroom to get my phone. I darted back into the room and saw my phone lying on a couch next to his bed. I grabbed it and ran for the door. I unlocked 2 locks on one door, and when I opened that one, there was an outer door. I managed to get it open. As I ran out, the adrenaline was so high in me, I ignored the elevator and went straight for the stairs. I ran around in circles down it for what seemed like forever until I finally reached the bottom. I practically leaped down a few steps to go out the lobby to the main door I had entered from. It wouldn't open as I pushed as hard as I could on it. I then began to start sobbing to myself and cursing. thought of me having to go back into that tunnel to hide again from him came over me, and I almost began to accept that as a reality at this point. I quickly tried to pull myself together and noticed the typical button you should press to disable the magnet that holds the door lock. I pressed it, heard the monotone beep that follows, and fell out of the door and into the snow. I never understood why characters could not pull themselves together when running in horror movies, always falling on themselves. But in that moment, I did the same, and I sort of understand it now. I treaded through the thigh-high snow into the main road by exiting the complex. I sprinted, ignoring my lungs screaming for air down the main road, only slowing down once I reached the bridge that led me to my street. Once I got inside, I sat in my bed for 2 hours, nearly shaking, before I told anyone about it. The Cottage in the Woods. Written by Lowly Bumbo. Now, this isn't a scary story, but more of a creepy one. My friend's dad's family used to live in the woods near Eureka Springs, Arkansas. My friend's uncle was the oldest of the 3 kids and was allowed to explore the woods on his own, even though he was only about 9. One day, he came across a little cottage nestled in the woods. He knocked on the door and was greeted by 2 old ladies. He promptly asked for some water, as he had been exploring for hours. The ladies invited him in and gave him milk and cookies and sat down and talked with him while he pet their white cat. They talked for a while, and they eventually invited him to stay for dinner and spend the night, because it was getting dark and he was a ways from home. His parents were pretty used to him being in the woods for nights without coming back, so he accepted without question. He spent the night without incident and returned home the next morning. He visited many more times over the next year, and one day they told him that to bring his parents and brothers the next time he came. So the next week, the whole family embarked on a long trek to the cottage. When they arrived, however, they found the remains of a small cottage that had appeared to have been abandoned for years. Everyone was confused, as they all trusted that my friend's uncle had visited the women many times. They had absolutely no idea what happened, or if my friend's uncle had actually been visiting anybody. To make things even weirder, as they were leaving, an old skinny white cat ran past them, darting into the trees, leaving them in utter shock.